Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Stevens, and I want to welcome you to another inspiring conversation. I have the privilege of being the founding co-director for the Inspired Leadership Initiative here at Notre Dame. As many of you know, it's a program that offers the opportunity for accomplished people who have finished their traditional careers to come to Notre Dame for a year and be able to pursue an area of study of their choosing, engage with students and faculty as a mentor with the overall goal of being a better force for good. You can learn more about this at our website, ili.nd.edu. Partnering with the Alumni Association and ThinkND, our theme this semester is Transforming Lives and Lives Transformed, with a focus on three critical and timely topics: pursuing a second act, the intersection of spirituality and leadership, and solving societal problems. And our guest today, our first guest, has had a tremendous impact and has dedicated his life to solving societal problems, justice, and the American way, with a strong voice for helping those in underserved areas. Karl Racine became the first elected Attorney General for the District of Columbia in 2015 and was re-elected in 2018. Mr. Racine's priorities include preserving affordable housing, employing evidence-based juvenile justice reforms, cracking down on slumlords, holding unscrupulous employers accountable for wage theft, and protecting consumers from scams and abusive business practices. He is also committed to making investments in new efforts to protect seniors and other vulnerable residents, interrupt violence in the district, address childhood trauma and racial injustice, and more. Attorney General Racine draws from over 25 years of legal and leadership experience in his work on behalf of district residents. Mr. Racine has worked in both the public and private sector, including becoming the first African-American to be a managing partner of a top 100 law firm. Outside of his official role, Attorney General Racine remains involved with a variety of causes, including youth literacy and mentoring. As we have only Karl for 30 minutes, you can read the rest of his incredibly impressive bio on ThinkND website. So Karl, welcome to Inspiring Conversations.
Pleasure to be here with you, Chris.
Well, we met about a year ago, the day I would say kind of the earth stood still, so to speak, as dinner guests of the amazing Raul Fernandez, the day that the NHL season was canceled and we were going to go to a hockey game. So instead, Raul took us out for dinner, and I called that a great final supper.
Indeed, it was. It was the last time, frankly, that I've been out at a dinner with wonderful friends where the numbers were more than 10 people and wasn't outside. So I'm looking forward to the next big supper in DC with our good friend Raul, hopefully soon.
That's great, Karl. Well, it was great to see you there that night and your partner, Kim. And I understand that you've got some good news in your family.
We've got great news. Kim and I are the parents of a bright young lad who's 3 weeks old in 2 days, named Kareem. And, we talked to Kareem. He looks like he's considering Notre Dame and UCLA. So we've got at least 17, 18 years to work on him. Maybe he comes there and participates in the Golden Dome.
Well, I hope he comes here because we don't want him going to a JV school.
Exactly right.
So, Karl, yesterday was a really important day in this country, given its history of racial injustice. I think it was Dr. King that stated injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. With the guilty verdict on all three charges on Mr. Chauvin, I believe you tweeted, "While this decision may provide some solace, it does not heal the wounds of generations of mistreatment, but perhaps it is the part of the reckoning of a new era of reform." Can you expand on that, please?
I really believe that to be the case. I mean, first of all, clearly the jury looked at all of the evidence and came to a singular conclusion pretty quickly. In my experience as a trial lawyer, that tells you something about how clear the evidence was presented and how unequivocal the verdict was. And so kudos to the jury and the prosecution team there. I think it's important for us to note, however, that we've got a long way to go in terms of changing the way in which communities are policed, particularly vulnerable communities. And this may be a start. I'm heartened by changes that are happening throughout the country, in particular, New Jersey. The Attorney General there, Graywall, has come up with a really great reform package that really focuses on the humanity of every single person, including law enforcement, with the goal being that no one gets killed during an interaction with the police. I really believe that the multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-geographic focus on fairness and justice is going to bring the change that we need finally.
Well, the country was certainly on edge. There's been enough situations where after a verdict is rendered, bad things has happened. Was the district prepared for a rough night in case the verdict went differently?
We were. In fact, a couple days in advance, we had deployed, working with the Biden administration, the DC National Guard. And of course, folks were gathered to protest if the verdict turned out the other way. Happily, the night ended up in a celebratory mood. Few, if any, arrests. I didn't see any this morning before 6 a.m. So peaceful is the word.
That's great. Well, I shared some of your history, but I think our audience, I'm sure, would love to be able to hear about your journey to where you are in your own words.
Sure. I think what people may want to take away from is that, not unlike many of your personal stories, I'm sure, I am the product of immigrants coming to the United States, in my case, from the country called Haiti in the Caribbean, really seeking a better life for their kids. We left Haiti when I was just an infant because the dictator there was absolutely treacherous, violent, and limited freedom in that country. So my family loves America. I'm a proud naturalized resident of the District of Columbia, having attended Catholic school and other products. My values are all about focusing our talents, not only on ourselves, that's okay, but also sharing our talent, especially to those who could benefit from them the most.
So what the audience may not know is that Karl and I went to the same high school, St. John's College High in Washington, D.C., and we also went to the same junior high school, public high school, Alice Steele. So you are a product of a great school system in Washington, D.C., and of the Christian Brothers. Say, Karl, I also noticed that you're taking a really strong stand about the emergence of falsified CDC documents. Can you share with us what your office is doing in that regard?
Sure, and I want to bring in not only our office, but attorneys general, Democrat and Republican, all throughout the country are absolutely focused on removing the misinformation, the disinformation, the falsehoods, and the scams that are related to the pandemic, and now importantly, the vaccine. And so it's really our job to try as best we can to make sure that when people are accessing information related to COVID-19 and the vaccine, that they have the truth before them. So I'm happy to say on a bipartisan basis, this doesn't happen a lot, not enough in our country, Republican AG and Democratic AG are all working together to ensure that the public sees the truth, not phonied up scam documents.
So as Attorney General for the District of Columbia, in your second term, you've had the opportunity to interact with 3 different presidents. Can you speak to a little bit about how that might be a little bit different by each one?
They're very different people. There's no doubt about that. So with President Obama, I came into office in 2015, January, and of course, he was on his way out towards the tail end of 2016. While I admire Barack Obama greatly, I got to tell you, he did not really engage, nor did his administration, very much with the attorney generals. And I thought that was a missed opportunity there. Fast forward to President Trump. President Trump, on the other hand, sought to directly engage continuously with the attorneys general. And while, clearly as a Republican president, he was focused on Republican AG who could help push forward his agenda, I got to tell you that his charm offensive included numerous attempts to woo the Democratic AG. I was over at the White House several times more than President Obama invited the Democrat AG, Karl Racine. So it was an interesting experience there with President Trump. I got to tell you that Joe Biden seems to have learned from President Obama's ways, and he has engaged his entire administration with both bipartisan AG and Democratic AG. Less of a charm offensive, more of a substance and policy offensive from Biden.
Got it. So we seem to be living in an increasingly litigious society. Can you speak to the case work demands of your office today? They must be extraordinary.
It's unbelievable. So what we do at the Office of Attorney General is a few things. And I'm sorry if you hear on background my little guy crying. He's just showing love in that way.
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of our responsibilities is to defend the District of Columbia when it is sued. And that's where we see a lot of the litigiousness of our society, as we get sued literally every single day for a host of matters. It's our policy at the Office of Attorney General that if we see something that is credible, we try to resolve the matter in a way that gets it out of the court, brings resolution. If we did wrong, we acknowledge that, and we make the victim whole. Unfortunately, there are also a lot of frivolous cases. Additionally, to those defense of DC cases, what I really enjoy doing more than anything else is using the resources of the government to help underserved, poor people in the District of Columbia who may not have the wherewithal to hire a lawyer on issues that matter a lot to them, like their housing. Yep. And so we've really focused a lot, you mentioned earlier, on affordable housing. In the District of Columbia, as you know, there's been a lot of growth and development. That growth and development has been great, but has not necessarily been equal. And we've also seen attempts to really harm the poorest folks in the District of Columbia. And those are the cases where we go after slumlords and others that would seek to, frankly, defraud people who may not be sophisticated enough to protect themselves.
Well, having grown up in Washington, D.C. for part of my life and living in Southeast in an apartment in Naylor Gardens and commuting into the city and going past Capitol Hill, the transformation in Capitol Hill alone, in terms of going from being, a little bit recessed in terms of the people that could live there to now it's multi-million-dollar condos. But I had another direction I want to ask you about. There have been, I hope there is not more, there have been at least 50 mass shootings in our country since March the 16th. What can we do to stop the carnage?
Well, I mean, there is no doubt, that there are a plethora of guns out there in our communities. And I also recognize, of course, that, guns don't shoot themselves, that people do that. But I can tell you that in the District of Columbia, where we have strong, and I would consider them to be common sense gun restrictions, young people can literally rent a gun for a half an hour. And if you're talking about giving access to people who, frankly, are experiencing trauma, are not well, mentally developed, then you're seeing a lot of petty disputes and petty beefs being resolved by gunshots. So the gun problem in America is a real problem. There is no doubt, in my view, that the availability of guns is part of the problem, as well as the need for us to, frankly, buckle down and understand that there are a lot of people in our country who suffer from trauma and other issues who have no business having any weapons in their range. So
a lot of these crimes and mass shootings are occurring with AR-15s, automatic assault rifles. Should they be banned?
I hope that as a country we can come to a dialogue that says, look, let's respect the Second Amendment right that people have to have guns in their homes. Let's respect hunters. Let's respect people who collect guns. But let's get guns that are really the machinery of war out of the hands and out of the accessibility of people who won't use them in a war, but instead will use them at a Walmart or at a FedEx. We certainly don't need those kinds of guns. That's my position.
Along that line, what do you think are some of the greatest change needs of the American judicial system today?
Well, I think the American criminal justice system, I'm going to focus on that, is going through some changes in a positive way, but needs to accelerate the reform. America, for example, criminalizes, prosecutes, and sentences for longer durations of time more people harshly than any other country in the world, with a couple exceptions that you wouldn't want to be part of this company: North Korea, China, and Russia. And so I think that we can proceed with justice in a much more thoughtful and balanced and proportional means, where we literally are investing in reform in the jails and prisons, providing education and vocation, and giving people who will return to our society at some point a chance to get themselves right while they're incarcerated.
So I just have a couple more questions, but I want to remind the audience that you have a questionnaire that I'm going to have Emily send out via chat, that if you've got questions for Karl, we've got about another 14 minutes or so with his time. So I know you can't comment on specific cases or investigations, but can you speak to the process that the Attorney General's office goes through leading to an indictment, please?
Sure. So quick thing to notice, realize in DC is a peculiar place, right? We are a city that wants to be a state. I'd argue that we should be a state, but we're not a state. And that impacts our criminal justice system. What it means is that my office has jurisdiction over crimes committed by juveniles and some jurisdiction over crimes committed by adults, but it's the federal authority, the United States Attorney's Office, that actually prosecutes the overwhelming majority of adult offenses, including offenses before the grand jury. Having said that, I'm quite familiar with the process. The long and short of it is that the grand jury is utilized as an investigative tool in order to subpoena witnesses, gather evidence, and investigate crimes. The prosecutor is the only lawyer who is in the grand jury with the grand jury. The defense doesn't have the right to appear before the grand jury. And so it's often said that any prosecutor worth his or her salt could indict a ham sandwich, because after all, they're providing a one-sided case to a very captive grand jury. We've seen recently grand juries are acting a bit more independent, but it's important to note that in America, a grand jury is a prosecutor's tool to bring an indictment. Right. And I got to tell you, from having done defense side cases as well as prosecuting cases, I have never read an indictment that was entirely 100% correct. And so the role of having a defense counsel and the rights afforded to our defendants in the criminal justice system are incredibly important.
Wow. So on a personal note, we both shared the same head coach at St. John's High School, the legendary Joe Gallagher, Joey G. Was Coach Gallagher an inspiration during your amazing all-metropolitan career?
That's very kind of you. He was an extraordinary inspiration to me. I first met Coach Gallagher when I was in 5th grade at the St. John's DeMatha summer camp.
Yep.
And I just couldn't keep my eyes off of him. There was something about him that reminded me a lot of my father and my other family members. So literally, I would trail him wherever he went. I found him to be funny, smart, and loving. As a coach, I'll give you 2 big takeaways. He pulled me aside and he said to me right before the senior year, "Hey, Karl, we don't win unless our team enjoys passing more than they enjoy shooting. And so it's going to be your job to make sure that every time you have a chance to shoot, if you see somebody open, pass the ball. That'll get the other guys passing." That's number one. The second piece of advice, I, like many folks who played high school basketball, really wanted to earn a college basketball scholarship. and I was fortunate enough to be a pretty good player and had many of those opportunities. At the end of the day, my mother really wanted me to attend the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League school, didn't give basketball scholarships. My mother and I agreed to let Joe Gallagher make the decision. And Joe had worked with my mom before. The decision had been made, go to Penn. I was pissed, but I do appreciate they made the best decision for me.
Well, and you became captain of the Penn team and had a great 4 years there. So let's go to our audience for questions. And Jessica, who's I think an Air Force veteran from Fort Worth, we shortened this, Jessica, just so that, and I've read the entire question to Karl before we came on the air, so he gets it. So when providing commentary on trials on TV, the commentators regularly refer to psychological aspects of trials used by lawyers, such as colors and other aspects or exhibits, to sway juries. My question is, why do we allow known manipulation techniques to be used in court at all? Should we not be working towards a system that provides facts as best as possible without purposefully using psychological tactics?
It's a great question, and there is no doubt that adversaries seek to utilize every advantage, even in a trial. But under our system of justice, and I actually think it works pretty well here, you've got two important checks and balances to that. The first is your opponent. And your opponent's got to be on their P's and Q's to make sure that a glossy exhibit or a chart or any other kind of diagram is not unfairly manipulative or prejudicial to your side. The second check and balance is the judge. And so even though the commentators are talking about that, please know that in courts that I practice in, every use of a demonstrative exhibit, it has to be cleared by the judge after the opponent has an opportunity to make objections.
Wow. Again, Jessica's got a second question, and we shortened a little bit, but you've heard the whole question. It feels like our current legal system focuses on whether we should send someone to jail or whether we should make the person pay money. It feels like the system is not working towards solutions. If we had punishments other than jail or a fine, could we use that as a first step to work towards a solution to the problem?
Jessica, I totally agree with that. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the innovation that we're utilizing in DC. We're huge proponents of restorative justice. What restorative justice is an alternative to the adversarial process that we talked about in responding to your other question, where there's no lawyer arguing your side, no prosecutor trying to prosecute someone. What it is a victim-based system where the victim has the key to justice in their hands and decides that the justice that they want to proceed with is a facilitated, could be set of conversations or meetings with the offender. And so we've got restorative justice conferences where we have an offender and a victim literally talking about the incident that occurred, why the offender offended, how he or she hurt the victim, and what the victim would like or needs in order to go forward. These victim-centered processes are, in my view, going to become even more popular because they're ways for victims to have agency or a stake in a process. I want to tell you, we've had over 200 of these restorative justice circles, some involving serious offenses. 96% of the victims who we've talked to after the circle would recommend it to other victims. So that is an alternative to the traditional criminal justice system.
Thanks. Salam in Washington, D.C. asks, despite being the home to many great hospitals and medical schools, study shows a continuously staggering healthcare inequity in the Washington area, such as Southeast versus Georgetown, Baltimore area. As an attorney who's looking to improve double standards, especially with the new administration, what are the core plans you and your team are making to address this critical issue?
Well, those are incredible issues. The inequities in the District of Columbia are vast. And as Chris was recounting, we've seen a lot of, really cool and great development in the District of Columbia. But people in DC will tell you the truth, and that is that there are a lot of haves and there are a lot of have-nots. What we can try to do as lawyers is to balance the level playing field if our legal tools can be utilized. Let me give you one example. The prior administration sought to dramatically reduce the benefits of food stamps, called SNAP benefits. That would have dramatically and negatively impacted the course of a lot of DC residents, particularly our poorer residents and their kids who rely on food stamps in order to, provide for themselves. Fortunately, we were able to prevail in court, and indeed now those benefits have been expanded. So that's one way that lawyers can look to level the playing field. Oftentimes the playing field needs to be leveled by others in the system, including legislatures and the executive. The executive here is the mayor.
Tom from Notre Dame asks, is there a role for public officials to help facilitate the reduction of extreme divisiveness politically today?
I love that question, no doubt about it. I happen to have the privilege of being the president this year of the National Association of Attorneys General. That's a bipartisan group. As president of the National Association of Attorneys General, I get to identify one issue that our room will focus on for the entire year. The issue that we've identified is hate. And we know that hate is a longstanding problem in our country. And we know that it is completely inconsistent with the greatness that we aspire to as Americans. We've seen hate, unfortunately, in many, many ways. Charlottesville, El Paso, the Tree of Life Synagogue. There's a terrible hate group called Incel that targets women because men blame them for their incelibacy, for being celibate. So hate is a real big problem. And the way to tackle big problems like that is to get leaders on a bipartisan basis to first acknowledge the issue, then go about educating people around it. And that's what we're hoping to do this entire year around hate. I should mention, of course, the increase in hate that we've seen most recently concerning Asian American and Pacific Islanders, oftentimes related to unfair scapegoating regarding the pandemic.
Well, we've only got about 2 minutes left, Karl, and I'd love for you to be able to have the last word to our audience. You've been very generous with your time during an extremely busy time for your office.
Well, Chris, I just want to thank you and your excellent team, of course, Emily, for working with our team at the Office of Attorney General. Love what you're doing in regards to leadership at Notre Dame and providing opportunities for folks who are about to embark on a second career. Would look forward to engaging with you into the future. Again, going back to the beginning, I'm the proud son of wonderful parents who always reminded us that our talents that we've been given are not only to be used for ourselves, but for other people. And I know that that's consistent with the way you live your life and the Notre Dame mission. Thanks for having me.
Karl Racine, thank you so much. Corinne is a very, very lucky young man to grow up with a father like you. I know you admire your parents very much, and I know he's going to admire you and Kim greatly. Congratulations, and thank you again for joining us. I'm thrilled to also welcome our second guest to talk about the future of the American justice system. Richard Nussbaum is a distinguished attorney in South Bend and has been an incredible contributor to Notre Dame on many, many levels. Dick is a 1974 graduate and a classmate of mine. He was a heck of a baseball player for the Irish, and he also earned his law degree here as a double domer at Notre Dame. And he's one of the most respected attorneys here in Indiana. A member of Notre Dame's Board of Trustees since 2006, Dick is also past president of the Monogram Club, as well as the Alumni Association. In 2014, he was recognized by the Alumni Association with the Soren Award, their highest award that they bestow for distinguished service to Our Lady's University. Dick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's a great honor for me to be on this show and to participate in any program that you're leading. So thank you very much.
Well, I just want to thank you. Karl's schedule is pretty busy, and with yesterday being the kind of day it was, he had to shorten the time he could have with us from an hour to 30 minutes. And I sent a frantic text to my good friend Dick Nussbaum, and as always, he responded, and happy to have you here.
Well, you had to go pretty deep in the bench and the bullpen to get me, but glad.
Not true.
That's one of the great advantages of living in South Bend, Indiana, and being so close to Notre Dame is that you can fill in situations like this one. I'm glad to do it.
Great. So I'd love for you to maybe give your thoughts as an attorney for so many years and a partner in a law firm here. Give me your thoughts on yesterday's verdict in Hennepin County.
Well, early in my career, for about 10 years, I was a prosecutor. And so when I look at cases and how they progress, I'm very interested in how the prosecution team presents its case. And I felt from the very beginning that this was a case that, although most people would say was a slam dunk, was not a slam dunk, simply because of some of the subject matter, the history of the difficulty in police brutality cases in the criminal justice system. But they crossed every T and dotted every I. And I think Karl mentioned earlier about how quickly the verdict came back. 10 hours in a case like that is an incredibly short time. And I think it goes towards the ability of the prosecutors to present a very compelling case. So from a prosecutor's standpoint, I'm not surprised by the verdict. It was well tried, and I congratulate them for their conviction. But you can't ignore the fact, the bigger picture of the societal impact that this is going to have. And I agree that this is just a small step forward, but I think it's a significant one because there was certainly a diverse group of prosecutors that prosecuted this case. There was a diverse group of witnesses who testified. There was a diverse jury. And there was a diverse community that was very interested in the issue and the result. And I think that's the recipe for success going forward.
So I also want to ask you a similar question that I asked Karl, and that is with 50 mass shootings in this country since March the 16th alone, what do we need to do to stop the carnage?
Well, Karl gave a number of very good suggestions. Again, going back in my experience, back in the early 90s, I was a city attorney in South Bend, and we actually proposed and passed a gun control ordinance. And I was the individual who presented the case before the South Bend Common Council. And I was amazed at the pushback that this legislation had. It was the first time I kind of came in contact with the Second Amendment folks who very much have a point of view. And our ordinance banned assault weapons, and it basically was patterned after what was pending in Congress at that time. Congress passed the legislation which actually preempted our ordinance, and for a period of 10 years or 20 years, I can't remember what the sunset was on that legislation, we really saw a fairly good decline in mass shootings and abuses of weapons. But since that time, since it's sunsetted, there's been a plethora of guns that have just flooded. You know, we have a country of more guns than people. We have guns on the street that should not be on the street with assault weapons. And I think we got to do a better job of helping some of the underlying causes, which mental health issues, the systemic racism that's occurred in this country. There's just a lot of underlying issues that we need to address. So it's a large problem. We need to have less guns. We need to get rid of the assault weapons that are weapons of war. We need to enforce our laws. And frankly, we need to convince those who are worried about their Second Amendment rights, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to take away someone's Second Amendment rights. So it's going to require people like Karl Racine to work hard on that particular subject, and hopefully some of the things that have happened most recently here in Indianapolis will create a bipartisan solution.
So you've seen a lot in your days as an attorney, servicing clients and servicing the university. And if you were to kind of take a look forward and think, what are some things that need to change, need to be improved in the judicial system, criminal justice system? Would you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. And the criminal justice system, frankly, having practiced law, it'll be 44 years this October. And I like to say that at some point I'm going to stop practicing and really doing something. But we've got a pretty darn good judicial system there. And but like everything else in the country, there are a lot of ways to improve it. We need to provide more resources to the judicial system. I don't know that we are paying our judges enough. Here in Indiana and St. Joseph County, we're very fortunate with the quality of the bench that we have. So it's important that you have a good, diverse bench, that we're going to make the decisions that we're all going to have to live by. We need to be very sensitive to some of the inequities in our society so that everyone has the same opportunities within our justice system to meet that obvious goal of equal justice under the law. I think some of the issues with regard to technology, it's been fascinating the last year that there have been trials that have been conducted virtually. There have been mediations and hearings and client meetings that have been conducted virtually. So there's an opportunity to have to have much more outreach into the community. But at the same time, the thing about the law that I've always loved the most is the interpersonal contacts that you have with your clients, with the judges, with the other side, with the other lawyers. And I hope we don't lose that. So we need to be very cognizant of the technology challenges and use it in the best way possible. And like everything else in society, make sure that everyone has an equal chance to have their case heard, their business conducted, and if it's a criminal case, that everybody has a chance to get the best kind of result that they deserve.
So a lot has been said of the new opportunity for student athletes to be able to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. We have coaches throughout this country making multi-millions of dollars in sponsorships and things like that in addition to their salary. So many think that this is long overdue, but there's no national law on this. And I think there's no fewer than 27 states that are in the process of considering legislation about how they would manage that in that state. Do you think that's the right way to do this?
No, I think that the sports, the college sports themselves through the NCAA and other organizations have had a great opportunity to address this subject, and for whatever reason have been unable to reach resolution. And as a result, it slipped into the political process. And so it's much better to solve something yourself than to have someone solve it for you. So I think we're kind of playing a little catch up with regard to the NCAA and the institutions across the country. I will say that Notre Dame has been a leader in addressing this issue. Jack Swarbrook and Father John have been on the forefront, pushing for rights for student athletes. At Notre Dame, you were an athlete, but you were first a student, as was I. So we've always had that goal of providing an education while at the same time allowing somebody to be able to pursue a sport. And I do think that athletes have been taken advantage of. There is a way that I think they can be compensated without destroying what has been a pretty good model of amateur athletics within the college ranks. I think once we start getting into pay for play, it's not going to work out well. I know Notre Dame is not interested in that, but Notre Dame is very interested in making sure its student athletes are rightfully compensated for their name, image, and likeness.
I was pleased to be able to see that apparently Notre Dame has at least 90% of its undergraduate and graduate students, postdoctorate students, vaccinated, and just about all the faculty and staff and family members down to 16. It's been quite a year. How do you think that Governor Holcomb and Father John and the leadership of the university have handled this pandemic?
Well, let me tackle Governor Holcomb first. I worked for a governor for all during his time in office, and when he was Lieutenant Governor, Joe Kernan, graduate of Notre Dame, was a Democrat. Governor Holcomb is a Republican, and despite that, despite the differences that we might have politically, I have found that he's been most of the time right on the money. He's provided good leadership with regard to getting the vaccines out to people here in the state. He's allowed, for the most part, local institutions to, local governmental agencies to make up their own rules. So here in St. Joseph County, we've had mask mandates, which I think are very important. I think that Governor Holcomb has done his best to keep politics out of the healthcare decision. So I would rate him very high on that. And my feelings about Governor Holcomb are couched in the fact that he's got two portraits in his office of former governors. One is Mitch Daniels, who he worked for, now president of Purdue, and the other is Joe Kernan. And he had a lot of respect for Governor Kernan, who we lost last July. And he was very, very gracious in his thoughts about Joe Kernan. So anybody that looks up to him is someone that we should look up to as well. So I'm a little biased, but that's my opinion. Now, with regard to Notre Dame, I think the word that should be used there is courage. I thought Father John was way out ahead of himself, maybe over his skis a little when he said we're going to open up. I think a lot of people like myself thought that wasn't the right decision, but boy, was he right. And he had the courage to stick by it. I think part of the success that Notre Dame has had was, I think you've mentioned before, the student body and their cooperation. Kind of fell off the wagon a couple times, but really got back in the wagon quickly. I also think there's been extraordinary cooperation between our local governmental officials, the health department, Dr. Fox, who worked very close with Notre Dame. And as a result, for the most part, we've had a very successful in-person experience for our students, 90% vaccinated right now. So I got to give Notre Dame an A+ as far as how they've handled the pandemic.
For those who don't know, we plan to be back in business in August, back on basically a regular schedule, which would include a fall break and utilize the summer to try to be able to make some transition happening here. So a lot of good has happened here. And just before the call, we were talking about it, and I have almost 200 students in my classes, and what they have been through and what the university and the students have been through is pretty incredible. The courage that they have shown, the resilience that they've shown, the flexibility that they've shown, the determination that they've shown is truly, truly, truly laudable. So I know Joe Kernan is kind of a mentor to you, Dick, and in addition to your law practice and the many hats that you've worn here at Notre Dame, in 2015, you became president of the Midwest League Baseball, a minor league baseball single A, and that includes the reigning champions, the South Bend Cubs, under the leadership of Joe Hart. So, Dick, minor league baseball lost an entire season last year, but they plan to be back in business in May, I believe. How do you think it's going to go this year?
Well, I think that for the most part, it's going to go well. There's certainly a pent-up demand for baseball fans. I think the fact that the Major League Baseball schedule was able to be played at least partially last year was important. I think the teams are dedicated to making sure that the fans who will attend will be safe. I know that there's not going to be full ballparks until we can, we can put things in place to make sure everybody's safe. But the protocols that they have and that they're going to operate under beginning May 4th, which is when the minor league baseball season begins, are pretty extensive. And I have every confidence that if somebody can get a ticket, it's going to be limited tickets, that when they go to the game, they'll be able to enjoy the game and do it safely.
It's a pretty amazing place, and we've actually done case studies in my class for the South Bend Cubs, and what Mr. Berlin and Joe Hart have done down there to really turn that into a wonderful family experience when you go to the game is something that I really, really enjoy. And I think if you haven't taken in a South Bend Cubs game, you ought to, because it's quite an experience. They really focus on providing the best experience they have. Sarah asks, as someone with a long-standing legal career, what can you say about the past, present, and the future of our judicial system?
Well, that's a big question. And a good one. As I said before, I've got a lot of experience in the judicial system right now, and my experience for the most part has been very good. So I think we have a good foundation to build upon. The present has been challenged, as I mentioned before, because in-person court hearings and in-person client meetings, face-to-face negotiations, alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration has been virtual, but we've been able to do it. I think we've been able to be fairly productive doing it. So the challenge is going to be to build upon our foundation, recognize societal issues that penetrate the judicial system for sure. We're still a system where someone with more resources probably has a better chance of having a good outcome than someone without resources. We need as a profession to continue our pro bono work to make sure that everybody has a chance to get their cases heard and get their problems fixed. And we need to be able to balance the technologies we have so that we can continue to move cases along and get people the services that they require. If I can just say one thing about my experience and my education at Notre Dame. David Link, Dean Link, now Father Link, was the dean when I was in law school, and he's an interesting guy. He was a tax lawyer at a big law firm. He came in and taught at Notre Dame and was an excellent teacher. He then had 5 children, and unfortunately his wife passed, and he then went into the priesthood, and he ministers to individuals on death row in Indiana. So he's a fabulous person, and I had him for jurisprudence. And the one thing that he taught me that I think about every day when I practice, and that is he preached lawyer as healer. And people hear that and they think that doesn't sound like that's what happens. And a lot of times it doesn't. The lawyers have a chance to make things better or make things worse. And so that's what I try to do. And I know that's what Dean Link would want me to do and what many of his students do. And that's what makes the Notre Dame education different than others. We're a different kind of lawyer, I think. And I'm very proud of that lineage. But that's hard to do. But it's something you need to do every day. And I think every profession should look at themselves as healers.
So Tom from Notre Dame asks, first of all, thank you for your service to Notre Dame. The university has evolved remarkably since you and I graduated. What do you think are some of the next evolutions we'll see at Our Lady's University?
Well, I think we've done great things. Look, anyone that is in our class who hasn't seen the campus and hasn't walked around recently is just amazed by the physical plant. And I think we've recruited and we have maintained a great faculty here. I think we've been very cognizant of our Catholic traditions and at the same time being very open to different viewpoints on campus. However, I think we still have an issue on this campus, and I think they're trying hard to remedy it. And some of the things that I know that the current trustees are really working hard on. That is making sure that we are a diverse and inclusive campus. And that's a challenge throughout our society. And we've got some work to do at Notre Dame to do better in that area, and I think we will. So that's what I see in the future, is that we're going to recruit a more diverse student body, and I think we're going to be more inclusive as we go forward.
Okay. Emily from South Bend wants to know, in both your professional life and roles of service to Notre Dame, you have had a great deal of leadership experience, and you've made a great impact in the world around you. How do you determine where to spend your time and your efforts to be a greater force for good in the world?
Well, my life changed on March the 18th, 1974, when I met my wife, Mary Pat, and she's the reason I'm in South Bend. And the reason I have been able to participate dramatically in the university is because I've lived here for over 40 years. And she's the reason I'm here. And she also is a great North Star for me on what is the right thing to do. And she's been very supportive of a lot of things that I have done. And it's pretty easy to do the right thing when you have a wife like that, and when you have education like I've received, and the kind of people that make up this community. You just do it. That's all there is to it. You follow your instincts, and you do what you can to be a healer, as Dean Link asked me to be.
Well, I think as I recall, you were going to go to Western Pennsylvania for your law school, and you met Mary Pat at the baggage claim area.
That's right. And I impressed her mother and father. And so I got in by the back door that way. And we knew within a very short period of time that we were going to be a team. And we've been married now. It'll be 45 years this July. So I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Yes, sir. So Sean from Granger wants to know, ND Law is seeing a record number of applicants. What advice would you give to someone considering entering the legal profession?
Well, there's a lot of lawyers, but we always need good lawyers, great lawyers. And so get as diverse an education as you can, do as well as you can, watch and participate in legal service opportunities that are out there. There are a lot of different organizations that try to help underserved people. I know Notre Dame looks at that very carefully in their admission package, is what you've done with yourself in your past. But it's hard. It's hard to get into Notre Dame. It's hard to get into a lot of law schools. And it takes a special person to get in. It's a lot harder to get in now than when I got in. Thank God I'm not applying now, because I'd have no chance. But, it's just like anything else. Give everything you have and use your talents to the max.
So I think a lot of people, think about the movies, The Verdict or My Cousin Vinny, and you always see the trial and the dramatics at the trial and the flip-flop at the end, et cetera. But there's so much more that goes into it, isn't there, Dick, in terms of research and citing precedents and things of that nature?
Boy, I hope people will watch The Verdict and base their opinion on Law versus My Cousin Vinny. But and I would really encourage everyone to listen to Paul Newman's final argument in The Verdict. It's a very inspiring argument about what we need to do with the law. But preparation is everything, and you have to know everything that's going. Nothing should be a surprise. If it is, you're in trouble. And so, the legal research, the knowing what witnesses are going to say, being ready to go, being able to think on your feet, are all really good skills that you need to have to be successful in the courtroom.
Well, ironically, I just watched The Verdict last week, and one of my favorite questions was, after they returned the guilty verdict, they asked, Your Honor, is there any limit to the penalty that we can, the damages? No. So Patrick from South Bend wants to know, you spoke about gun reform legislation. Do you have any other memorable work from your time as city attorney in South Bend that you'd like to speak to?
Well, there's a lot. You know, being a city attorney was really interesting because you would have a morning meeting about a $40 million bond issue, and you go back to your office and somebody was complaining about the dogs barking in the neighborhood. So you had a wide range of things that you needed to do. You know, I worked for Joe Kernan when he was mayor and Steve Lickey when they were mayor, and they really laid the groundwork for a lot of the initiatives that Pete Buttigieg was able to take and run with. I was very proud of the way we made neighborhoods a priority and been involved in the Northeast Neighborhood organization for 20 some years. I'm very proud of the way Notre Dame and the community started to really come together during that period of time.
Yeah.
Which has had a great impact on the university and an even bigger impact on the community. So there's a lot of things I was able to do. I was really lucky to work with the kind of people that I worked with Mike Barnes in the prosecutor's office, who we lost, and Joe Kernan.
Yeah, a great man. So we share a similar passion, and that is for watching the Godfather trilogy. So of the three, which is your favorite one and why? Because of Tom Hagen?
Well, yeah, I always want to be the consigliere, okay? I like two the best, a little more than one. Wasn't so crazy about three, but as my wife will tell you, I watch them every time they come on. So it's my Italian heritage. My mom is 100% Italian, so I enjoy some of the cultural aspects of the movie.
Well, consigliere, I want to give you a chance to have the last words. We've had some questions from our audience, and any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with, please?
Well, I appreciate you having Karl on. I thought it was really important for our community to see someone of his caliber and the work they're doing. I guess I want to close, Chris, with congratulating you. You know, when we were bouncing around campus back in the 70s, I don't think either anyone would think that we would be sitting here talking to each other about such important issues today. And you've been an outstanding leader on campus, and your skills as a professor are amazing. And so I'm very proud of you to be your classmate, and very proud of what you've done. And you're just an example of what the students and the faculty and the staff here at Notre Dame do to make us a force for good in the world.
Well, thank you so much. The check will be in the mail this afternoon. Well, so thank you very much, Dick. I really appreciate you taking the time. So, and I also want to thank Karl for joining us today. And then also to thank Mary Scott and her ThinkND team, as well as our staff, Emily, Sarah, Lauren, Joan, Tom. They're just amazing. And for those of you interested, or you think somebody who might be interested in becoming fellows of the Inspired Leadership Initiative, please go to our website, ili.nd.edu. We're accepting applications for the next cohort through May the 1st. So long, everybody, and give somebody a hug soon, okay?